Hello, my name is Charlie Waite, and the great and wonderful Fotospeed have asked me to say a few words about printing and about my attitude to printing. But first I should say a few words of apology. Firstly, forgive please the rather makeshift studio behind me. There may well be during this recording sounds of ducks, of geese, of dogs barking, of bells ringing, hopefully not telephones, but there undoubtedly will be some disturbances. So I very much hope that you will forgive me for those. Right, the big subject of printing. But is it so big? It seems to me that over the years we have developed a certain resistance, if you like, to printing images, which strikes me as really being very, very sad, because firstly, what are we going to leave behind when we move on? And what will we leave for our future generations? Images imprisoned on external hard drives or computers that no longer can be read? I think we need to print. I have a little pet phrase, forgive me for this, there may be one or two more coming, which is the print is the photograph's rightful inheritance. And I really do believe that. There are certain things that I feel very, very strongly about, and I think as photographers we all do. One of the things we feel very strongly about is quality. We care deeply, deeply about the image that we're going to make. And then, if it's going to be turned into a photograph, a print, I should say, we really want to look at that print and be absolutely satisfied with every single element of it, every single feel of it, that you almost want to know that it's a really tangible entity all on its own, and that it expresses exactly what we wanted to express when we were there in that situation photographing. If it falls short of that, we're going to be disappointed. I mean, we know for a start what it feels like to be disappointed about something that hasn't worked in our image. But if it has worked, if it really has worked, and the great Ansel Adams used to say 12 a year and you're doing well, there's an interesting line. But if it really has worked, oh my word, we need to see a print that has parity with what we felt and what we saw, so that when we hold that print up and look at it in depth, and we do, don't we? We explore every single element of it. We want to be sure that it is exactly as we intended. So, when we have an exhibition, we are going to be vulnerable to photographers. And what do? We all know, don't we? They come up very close to the image and they have a deep look at it, and they look for the usual suspects, pixelation, bad HDR, whatever it might be. And then they stand back and they might well say, mumbling to each other, interesting, that doesn't look very good, does it? So our reputation, if you want, our cred is absolutely on the line. We need to be sure that our print is exactly as we planned for it to be. Now, one of the interesting things I think about, one of the many interesting things about this whole process is that we need to go back, or I certainly need to go back and remember what it was like in the darkroom. Now, I'm going back, actually, as it happens, rather a long time. And I remember very, very well the pleasure that I used to get, as many of us might, of my generation, and indeed more recent ones. There is an interest in printing. But there's a far, far greater majority of people who are printing digitally, which is a wonderful experience. But I just want to talk to you a little bit about the pleasure that one got when I was in the darkroom, because it's the same pleasure when you print digitally. It really is. Firstly, we all remember the image coming up in the developer. We remember that, those of us who did it. But if you think about it, when you then held that print dry afterwards, you felt much closer to your experience that you had in situ when you were there in the landscape. It's not the same on a monitor. I will shout that out loudly. It is not the same on a monitor. I used the word earlier, imprisoned. Well, it truly is imprisoned, manacled almost. The poor image is screaming to get out. Print me, print me. So when we print digitally, where's the resistance to that? Confidence? Confidence in what? Confidence perhaps in the quality? No need for that to be something that we should be concerned about, except our own inability and lack of experience to print. So I need to really convey something. I think it's very important to say, and I don't mind telling you. I was terrified of printing. I really was. I thought to myself, I cannot see the image on the monitor and then hope that I'm going to get something similar out of my print. I don't have the experience. I don't have the confidence. I simply don't understand how to print. Well, there are people who print much, much better than me. Many, 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 many. But I manage to do what I do, and I hope I do it pretty well. The only reason I do is because I had support. I had support from the very first instance that I had a relationship with Fotospeed. I had support from one of their senior technicians, Vince, a great guy, maybe many of you will know him, who supported me from the very start to the very end. He taught me through what I was to do, gave me the print profiles, calibration of screen, absolutely everything. It was terrifically helpful. The main problem, I think, with printing is that people feel a resistance, and that resistance comes from lack of confidence. It comes from being unsure as to what the result will be. Because all too often, we've seen, as I was saying earlier, the image on the monitor, and then when we see the finished result, it bears no resemblance to what we saw on the monitor. Well, of course, one is transmitted light and one is reflected, and we know there's going to be a difference there, but still things did not seem to look right. I mean, the colour didn't seem right. There was disappointment all over the place. And eventually we just said, oh, we'll send it off to somebody else. Now, here lies the rub. To send it off to someone else means that someone else is going to apply their own personal artistic interpretation of how the print should end up, not yours. The reason I said the print is the photograph's rightful inheritance is because ideally that inheritance for that print should come entirely from the photographer. The photographer makes the image, the photographer does the print. That's it. And that completes the circle. That's where really photography is at its best, where you don't send it off to somebody else. Yes, you might need to do some retouching, of course, with a little bit of restraint, perhaps, one hopes, but nevertheless, one wants to produce, ideally, the print yourself. And for years I did so in the darkroom, and now, with much more confidence, thanks to Fotospeed's support and holding my hand, very much so, I feel much more confident about printing. When that image comes out from the printer, it is not too dissimilar from the joy of seeing the print come up in the developer and subsequently drying and then putting it into a frame and framing it. Not too dissimilar at all. The thrill, the excitement, the sense of wonder, and of course when you hold the print you feel just so good. It's yours, and it's always been yours from its birth until its manifestation in print form. And that is so important, I think. It really, really is. You could almost say it's like a painter who says, oh yeah, I'll do some of the painting, but I don't think I'll do the rest. I'll let somebody else do that. One needs to claim the work as one's own personal expression of one's response to one's world around us. And I think to print is absolutely crucial. I've said this already, but I need to really emphasize it. There needs to be this breakthrough experience of gaining confidence about printing. It is not a dark art. It truly isn't. You need a printer. Yes, you do. You need to have some funds to pay for the ink, which we all know is rather expensive. But that investment yields the most wonderful, wonderful results. It takes a bit of time, maybe not months. It might take a few days, it might take a week or two, but in time, that whole business of printing suddenly is not so mystifying as it used to be. And all of a sudden, you think of other things, exhibitions, selling prints. People do sell photographs. Regrettably, unfortunately, I often think photographers don't buy enough photographs, but nevertheless, photography is the most wonderful, wonderful conduit, especially landscape photography, as we know, for people to engage more profoundly with the landscape around them. It's absolutely the most wonderful, wonderful thing to do. I know that all my very, very distinguished, and there are very many of them, landscape photographers and photographers in general, would urge everyone who is listening to this to print, because there's no question about it. It is hugely rewarding. Now, I've said a lot about that. We're going to have a look at one. I hope there's room on this screen. Years ago, I did a book called The Making of Landscape Photographs, and I don't want to talk about that. What I want to talk about is the front cover image. The front cover image was this. You might lose me for a bit. This front cover didn't look great on the front of the book, because in those days the technology was not really great in the early 90s. But now it's really much better. And I wondered whether I would be able to do a print of this, and I did. Out came the result. I shouted out loud with joy when I saw the finished result. Well, absolutely superb. It had complete parity with my experience. I can look at this image and go back to the very precise moment that I was there. There's just no question about it. It takes me right back to that point where I was standing here drinking in this beautiful location. And then I thought, well, I wonder what black and white how black and white would work on my Fotospeed paper. And I was very pleased to see that it worked very well indeed, thank you. I was used to glossy, semi-matte, silk finishes, multigrade, all sorts of things in the darkroom. But then I thought, well, let's just make a comparison and see what I feel about this one. And it was 3 horses. Sorry about the flare, because it's rather bright here. But I was extremely pleased with the result. I still print black and white traditionally in the darkroom. I haven't done for some time, but I am going to shortly. But when it comes to my digital printing with my Fotospeed paper, I'm immensely satisfied. And there is no more critical a person than the photographer. No more. The photographer has to see the result that completely satisfies their high expectations of the print, right across the board. It really is. There's nothing else that one can say about this, except that we need to see an image that matches the response that we made as human beings, the emotional response, the sense of awe, the sense of wonder. We need to pick up that print and look at it and feel exactly as we felt when we saw that image. Now, the hope is, of course, that our audience who comes to our exhibitions or sees a print that we perhaps have sold to them or given to them, who knows, they will feel a large proportion of what we felt. And the print is the thing that will carry that sense of response, that marvellous response that we had when we were in the landscape. The print is the only thing that will take that same feeling that we had to the audience for them to experience a similar response through looking at your image. So, thank you very much, Fotospeed. I gather there's going to be another photography show in September, by which time I hope and I'm sure that with everybody's support, the medical people and everybody else, this wretched virus will be a thing of the past. And long live photography, long live printing. Do consider printing yourself. It is immensely rewarding, and if I dare say, it's almost as rewarding as the making of the image in the first place. It's a sort of secondary wonderful hit, for want of a better word. Thank you very much, Fotospeed, and thank you to everybody who's been listening.